Welcome to the Dragon's Den. I'm your venerable host, Orochi, and today we are going to be talking about Wings of Change by Crystal Shire. I have very mixed feelings on this book, but they're not mixed feelings as in a little bit of good, a little bit of bad, and they mix together to be okay. This book does a lot of things and a lot of themes and a lot of stuff that I generally dislike, and I was not interested in reading this book until it was really put forth as, a really strong dragon book with a great story and great perspectives and really interesting themes in it, because the synopsis of it is basically, what if person turned into dragon and all of humanity was killed and then aliens take over? It's just like, what? So it's fantasy, sci-fi, weird stuff. And I'm like, that's not exactly something that interests me all that much, because that just sounds weird as hell. And there's so many other things and themes that just do not vibe with me very well. Even throughout reading it, lots of stuff pops up that I'm like, oh, that's a thing that I don't like. But what's interesting about this book is that despite it having all of these things that I dislike, it does them all in such an interesting and provocative way that it's not just a feeling of, okay, I can deal with that, but more of, oh, wow, that's actually interesting, and something that goes from I dislike it to, not only is it okay, I'm actually interested in the way that this is being told, which for me is not something that I see in a lot of books, because normally if there's something I don't like, I know exactly why I don't like this, and to have somebody take multiple different things that I dislike and turn them into a, well, what if they were done this way? And I'm like, well, actually, I kind of like that. And so I highly, highly recommend this book. If you like the idea of delving into themes of instinct and nature versus intelligence, because that's sort of the main theme of this, is that it's all from the perspective of these humans that are turned into these miniature dragon-like creatures via alien technology. That's basically this summary of the story and how they get along with aliens who come to the planet and take over. Not the aliens that kill all of humanity, and not the alien tech that changed them. There's at least 3 different alien things going on in it. But yeah, I think one of the things that makes me adore this story is that it is a slice of life story. It took me a while to realize that that was the thing that really makes me love the story so much, because it's just, the whole idea behind this story is, what is the life of a small-ish, intelligent, sapient, dragon-like creature while in this world of potentially and often hostile things that they have to get around, and how they as a community and certain ones as individuals just survive and thrive within the confines of the new world that they face themselves in. And it's done so well that just everything that happens is interesting, and it's hard to pick a stopping point of, is this the low point or is this leading into something? Every page feels like that, because it's always something happening. and leading into something. Even if it's just like, oh, the characters are bored this day. What do they do to get around that? And then, oh, something happens because of their day job or because of this, that, or the other thing, and that affects all the other characters and stuff. And it is so well done how everything just works together. So if you like any of that sort of stuff and like getting into the ideas of the perspective of a people who have sort of really taken on this mentality of being a sentient naturalist creature and how they can interact with societal stuff, then I highly recommend this. It was so good, despite having so many things that I did not think I could ever be interested in. So definitely a high recommendation. If any of the themes you don't think are for you, still give it a try. Just if you can get the sample on Amazon or whatever and just read the first few chapters, and it's just like, it's so well done that it just draws you in. And the characters are very interesting and very understandable, and it's just super great. So yeah, definitely get this on your to-read list and get it over with. I don't know how far the series is going to go. There's a second book, I know. I don't know if there's a third or anything, but I really hope this continues on because I do have a fascination for well-done slice of life type of stuff when you add in elements of fantasy and sci-fi, because that just the amount of interesting things you can do within that setup is just amazing, and I adore that. So with that out of the way, we're going to get into the spoiler section. And the beginning, there's it's sort of all spoilers in the beginning, but it's just like the first few chapters. So much happens just to set up the basis of what this book is about. Like the first few chapters are just understanding the premise for the story, which is the main point of view, Tasha. She's a girl who's going to college, and her friend isn't there to pick her up or whatever because they're running late, so she has to walk, and then she gets captured by this secret clandestine group who has alien technology from a crashed ship, and they aren't government funded because they pick people up from all over the world. And they've been doing this for a while because they have different subsets of people that they're targeting to use this alien technology on, just to see how it affects people. And so she's put through this process and then is just basically reborn as a dragonette, which is basically a large cat-sized dragon. And you don't really get a feel for how large they are because they're fairly small but not tiny. And then when it compares to the aliens that eventually take over, it's like, oh, well, the aliens are fucking huge. So the dragonets being small compared to them is very different than being small compared to humans. So I don't think they are all that small to humans. They're like large cats, like, you know, coon cat kind of large, if not maybe slightly bigger. And she's reborn, she breaks out of her egg, and it's never none of that technology or anything is explained or what exactly they're trying to do. She learns that they're experimenting on people and experimenting on different people to see what different results are. She was kidnapped because of her exceptional grades, and she's put into the, what if we take smart young people and use this technology on them, and what does that do for the results? And after being reborn, she's immediately mentally contacted by another dragonette, Drake, who's been there longer, and he fills her in on what's going on. And they're, as a new society of test subjects, their prime motivation is, do not let the scientists realize that you are still you. Because as far as they know, it's basically human genetic sacrifice to create these creatures. The scientists don't know that it's still the personality of the person that they captured, just in a new body. Which is interesting and strange that you wouldn't sort of have that on your periphery of a possibility. And it's also weird why the Dragonettes would think that it would be bad if the scientists found that out. But that's pretty much what the core of their mentality becomes. Do not let anybody know that you are sentient, because that will give them power over you, and they'll start seeing you as something that can be manipulated and used, instead of just like an animal that, technically you're doing the exact same things with. You're manipulating them and using them stuff, but it's definitely a different dynamic when you're doing that sort of stuff with a sentient creature, because you wouldn't treat another person like you would an animal most of the time. Unless you have a very, very high respect for other creatures. And so that progresses. She goes through a bunch of tests, and I think they live there for, she's there for like a year or two, going through, maybe it was slightly less than that, going through all of these tests. And then aliens show up. And the building gets destroyed, and a whole bunch of the test subjects get out. There's like 120 or something of them that manage to get away. And then these white aliens eradicate all of human life and then start killing off most other species before this separate alien species shows up and kicks them out, because the first one are sort of like invasive aliens, because they're just destructive everywhere. And so then the Kimari show up and they colonize the planet. And throughout the book, I think a weakness of the story, but it has to happen sort of to give the overall feel that this is a very light-hearted series. It's a very wholesome, feel-good series, and I think the primary reason for that is because the Kimari are perfect. They're basically a perfect society of, they have no crime, they have no fights or anything. They're hyper loyal. They're super this ultra perfect society where they've got everything figured out. Everybody has a job. Everybody does stuff. Nobody wants for anything. So there's no crime, and they don't get jealous of each other. And I often feel like a good descriptor of them, since they're 10 feet tall, grayish green, broad-shouldered, muscular humanoid aliens, is they're space orcs. They're big space orcs that act like Vulcans, except for once they hit a threshold of emotions, they break down and just go 150% in on their emotions. which is first noticed by the Dragonettes as like when anything like in any way, shape, and or form threatens a Kimahri child, like after the Kimahri come and set up their city, the Dragonettes are in the wild and going around, and several of them die to predators because these white stickman aliens released all of these other creatures out that are like hyper predators. So a lot of them die just trying to escape that, and so they eventually migrate into a Kimahri city and take residence in a park there. And they notice that other creatures, small predators and stuff like foxes and stuff, when there's an altercation between these small predators and a Kimahri child, the adults go into like hyper rage, and they don't only track down like the creature who did this, they wipe the whole species out. They just go full genocide mode. And so it sets up this thing that, you know, the Kimahri are super long lived. They live hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years. So they're super calm, super patient, super relaxed all the time. But when you push them, they push back stupid hard. They just go full on destroy everything. And it's kind of weird because that sort of sets this up as, oh, they're terrifying, because if you get on their bad side, that's it. It's over for you. But the Dragonettes don't ever get on their bad side, and that's sort of what makes the entire story a very lighthearted, feel-good kind of story, because she wanders around in the park day after day, living her life and, you know, being curious about the Kimahri, but also her instincts tell her that, you know, you don't want to be captured, put in another lab, experimented on, and so she's terrified of all these things. But then she finds a alien predator that's sort of described like a Komodo dragon-ish, and she just has this instinctual reaction that this thing is evil, this thing hunts us and kills us, so we need to attack it. And as a group, the Dragonettes sort of get together and realize, like, oh, yeah, we hate these things. Just on an instinctual level, we understand that these are our natural enemies and we need to kill these things. And so they kill one of them, and the Kimahri kind of find it, and so then they start doing massive sweeps, because apparently these things are a huge problem. They're sort of like an infestation across the galaxy. They are an invasive species that set up nests, and then they just propagate, and they steal onto spaceships to, you know, go to other planets and spread. So they're this sort of intelligent. It never really touches on if they intentionally are sneaking onto ships to spread out to other planets, but they're a parasitic species that just goes out to all these different planets. They're always looking to spread out, and they're very dangerous. The Kimahri, with all of their super advanced technology, cannot find a way to track them or hunt them down or properly exterminate them. All of the Kimahri's advanced weaponry do not work on them very well. All their like energy-based weapons don't work on them very well. So they have to use like traditional like swords and axe sort of stuff, which is very dangerous when fighting against a predator like that. So it's a very big thing in their society that, you know, different groups, a lot of them militarized groups that hunt these things down to exterminate them because they're so invasive. So the Kamari search through the whole park and surrounding areas because they're like, wow, one of these things got into our city. That's bad because this could kill people. And that's, yeah, we need to deal with that. But they don't find any more, and they kind of chalk it up to it must have gotten damaged on a ship or something and then died afterwards. Because the Kamari watch the dragonettes because they find them interesting, but it's also strange that these creatures literally live nowhere else except for this one park on this planet. And they've never seen them anywhere else in existence. Which is kind of weird when you look at the whole reason why humans started creating them was from this alien technology. So some alien somewhere must have been doing this. So I think that's something that never gets touched on, which I think is, I hope there's a book that comes out at some time that starts touching on, you know, the alien species who originally made that technology. Like, what the hell is this for? But then when Teresa's fighting the second one that she finds, she gets injured. And then they kill off this creature, the Sakura. But then one of the Kimari of the cleaning strike force, this little military group, comes in because this creature was sighted. And this guy spots her and notices that she's injured and sort of realizes that, oh, the dragonettes were the ones who attacked this thing and killed it. That's very strange because they seem like a very non-threatening species because they're not even carnivores. The dragonettes they're vaguely omnivorous. They primarily eat fruit, but it's seen that Teresa does eat chicken every once in a great while. And that's sort of chalked up as a human thing, that it's just leftover interests, not natural ones. But he grabs her up, knocks her out, takes her to the vet, gets her broken wing in a cast, and then he keeps her. And a large chunk of the story is this captivity where she's terrified that she's back in captivity and all alone, and she has no idea what this guy intends to do with her. But the story kind of progresses that the Kimari find out that, oh, hey, the dragonettes are have natural reactions to these invasive species and can actually be used to track them down. And so then it becomes this big thing where, as a society, the leaders determine, oh, well, if these creatures can be used to better our society, then we're just going to mark them as a protected species. And so anybody who harms them in any way, that's just death penalty. Just straight out, you do not do it. They're called bonded animals, and it's basically, anything that has a benefit to their society, they're just yeah, we're just going to incorporate this into our society because it's beneficial. And because, they're this perfect alien race, they just goes oh yeah, nobody would ever dare go against the law, ever. So because the dragonets become a protected species, that means, oh, they have nothing to worry about forever. Which to them is just like, yeah, that doesn't make any sense. Like, so many bad things could still happen, and how do we trust these people? But over the course of months of her healing, she gets to know him, and they become close. Like, he's super patient with her, super gentile, and like it never really, because it's from her point of view, it never really gets into what he was like before meeting her, but you really get the feel that he's an animal lover, a nature lover, and all this stuff, because why else would he have, upon seeing her injured, been immediately like, oh, I need to take her and to the vet and get her fixed up and get her healthy and stuff. Like, it's hard to compare, like, what would a human do in this situation versus what would these aliens who are, perfect in all these weird ways, what would a common Kimahri do in this situation? It's sort of hard to tell, but at the early stage of the book, because he's so interested in her, you kind of get the feel that he must love animals more than most. And I think was a good start to the story, in that he just fully dedicates his entire life to, yeah, I have this job where I do military stuff, but I'm taking a bunch of time off to help this wounded animal. And then once he finds out that she reacts to this, invasive species so well, it can be used to hunt them down, he reports that, and he basically becomes the beginning of a task force sort of thing, where he becomes her handler. And at that point, that's, for whatever strange reason, she can understand everything he says, because there's a lot of, because of whatever alien technology turned these people into these dragon creatures, they have basically genetic memory, where they just know all this stuff. It's mostly like a library of information, because there's no, like, reference information, like no personal information on it, like experiences. It's just connecting words to definitions of things and nothing else. But all the dragonets understand everything the Kimahri say, so she's working with the things that he says whenever he's talking to somebody on the phone and stuff, whenever he's communicating with people about, all the stuff that he's finding out. And when he tells his friend that, yeah, we might be able to use them to do this stuff, she kind of realizes that, oh, crap, I shouldn't have, and she didn't really have a choice, because, like, one of these creatures invaded his apartment and she attacked it. And so that's how he realized that, oh, she has this visceral reaction to these creatures. Once she figures out that, the higher ups have sort of determined that if this is useful and can be turned into a thing, then we're going to go ahead and make use of that. And she realizes, oh, that means I might not ever get out of here. And that's like a kind of turning point where it's like, that could be really bad. And so she a bit after that, she gets fully healed, and after trying to escape for quite a while, she finally gets her chance and gets away. And she become terrified because he put a tracker in her, like we do nowadays, right on the injection tracker. So when she got out, she had Drake cut it out of her, and then she was free and happy for a bit. But then she finds this Kimahri, whose name is Tareen, at the place where she dropped they dropped the tracker, which was into this river. And so she finds him by this river, having, used his locator to track the tracker down. And to him, she realizes that he probably believes that, somebody tried to either steal her, or something happened, and she ended up dead in the bottom of this river. And so he's just like sitting there crying, and she's just like, holy crap, the Kimahri do not express their emotions all that much. So to see that he's just like absolutely devastated by this just kind of tugs at her heart a lot. And after she got free, she realized that she was bored. Like, it seems that instinctually, most of the dragonettes just like to they just fly around, hunt for fruit, sunbathe, and like fly around, play games with each other a little bit, but they don't like do a whole lot. And so after being in a space where her mind was constantly, alert to all these things, constantly interacting with stuff and constantly being used, she can't really turn that off. And so she gets bored by everything, and she's just like, I actually liked hunting these creatures down to kill them. It felt not only good to get that instinctual use, like these are our enemy, we need to kill them, but it was also good to go out and be active and do these things and interact and explore and all this different stuff. So she decides to go back to him, and he basically recaptures her ever so gently, because she also has sort of felt like, they call it the bond because the Kimahri have bonded animals, but it's also like an instinctual thing where, and I really love the way that this was done, because it's just like, like dogs. Like, if you leave your dog somewhere for an hour or something, they feel like you've been gone forever and they cannot live without you there. And that sort of thing, I think the author like took that idea and put it into this. But it's not just the dragonettes feel that way, because the Kimahri does as well. Both Tasha and Tareen were just like, yeah, being apart from each other, it sucks. It's agitating. You always feel like something's missing, and you're always worried about what could be happening. And I love that it's a two-way thing, because I feel like in a lot of stories where people, quote unquote, bond with dragons, it's really just an excuse for, humans get power fantasy kind of stuff. And I'm not really into that sort of thing. So to see it be an actual two-way thing was super great in this story. And so she's hanging out with him, and he starts talking to his friends like, oh, well, if we're going to be working together as a group, his friend's like, have you given her a name yet? And then she realizes like, oh, shit, he's going to start calling me by something. And if it's not my actual name, that's going to get real weird. So while he's sleeping, she attempts to communicate with him telepathically to tell him what her name is. And so then the next day, when his friends are pushing him on this, he's just like, well, it came to me in a dream. I think I'm going to call her Tasha. It's a unique name, very different, just like her. It was just like so much in the story. It's like this heartwarming, feel-good kind of thing where it's like, yeah, of course it was going to turn out that way. But she really likes going on these trips with him, hunting down these creatures, and they go in packs of 3, where it's the dragonette and their handler searching these things out, where the handler's giving these commands. The dragonette is basically like a bloodhound, just seeking out the scent of these creatures, and then when they find it, the 2 guards that are with them seek these things out and kill them. And there's a lot of interesting interaction there with all the different searches that they do, and a lot of different stuff happens. And there's even one where a small trading ship's captain is actually like transporting one of these creatures illegally, and so he turns and almost kills Taurine, and then Tasha burns his face off, and when the guards come back after being tricked and attacked by the rest of the... Actually, I don't even remember if they were attacked by the rest of the crew. I think it was just the captain that was in on it. Or no, when they came... The crew was leading them to somewhere else, and that's when the captain turned on Taurine. And then when they came back, the crew turned on the soldiers, and the soldiers beat them. And then it was funny because then more soldiers arrive after being warned, but Tasha's instincts are to protect Taurine against everything, so she just lands on him while he's on the ground. I think it was like a mild poison or a mild injury that it took him quite a while to get over. And so one of the new trainees was like, "Oh, well, I gotta help him," and the other guys was like, "Nah, you don't want to go near that. She will attack you. As far as she's concerned, everything around her right now is a threat because her bonded is in danger, is injured." So it kind of just expresses, this take on instinct versus intelligence. And she's like, she knows that none of these people mean any harm. She knows that this person is just trying to do medical stuff, but her instincts are telling her she needs to be defensive. And so when this guy gets near, she just swipes at him and cuts his hand open, and he's all like, "Oh shit!" And the other guy's just like, "I told you that was gonna happen, man. I don't know what you expected." And there's a lot of little stuff like that that's really interesting in this book, of how it sort of describes like their instincts take over, and they're like, well, I know I shouldn't be feeling this way, or at least I can rationalize why I'm feeling this way, but I can't stop feeling this way. So I kind of just gotta go with it and try to just get through it. And I think that compares well to like anxiety and like fear response that people generally have, where it's like you can understand what's going on, but that doesn't mean you can have any control over it. It's controlling you, and you're barely steering the ship as best you can, which I think is really interesting areas to make stories out of. And then, what was the first inciting incident? I'm trying to remember. I remember what oh yeah, Toreen kind of starts talking with this woman who's very interested in the Dragonettes. She watches them all the time. She's super interested in them, and she sort of hangs around him to get a look at her, but then is also kind of just like, hey, they could be a romantic thing. So Tasha's just like, oh, I don't trust anybody else besides Toreen, but I see that he's got the hots for her, and she's obviously interested in him and his profession, so she fights against her instincts to stay away from other people, and she just lets this woman touch her, and he's like, oh wow, that's new. She doesn't let anybody touch her. And she's just like, yeah, this irritates the absolute fuck out of me, but I'm doing it for him because I know that this would be good for him. And that's such an interesting thing right there. And I love all of the like Kimari takes whenever Tasha's doing something because because of the stuff that she heard from them or picked up from them, she goes out of her way to do these weird things, and they notice all of these different things that she does, and they're just perplexed. They're like, why is she doing this? Why is she doing that? And one of Toreen's friends is like a scientist, zoologist kind of person, because he starts talking about, it's weird that they have these sharp claws and fire breath and, are very, you would think they would be predator carnivores, but all they eat is fruit, which doesn't make any sense. And why are they so tuned on killing Sakura when it doesn't make any sense that they would have evolved all of these ways to track and kill Sakura when they don't fight over resources. Like, they don't hunt the same prey, they don't share the same ecology or anything. And so he gets really into all the stuff, and they start just trying to like second guess, like, why is she doing this? Why is she doing that? And trying to rationalize the things that she does, not knowing that it's because she's intelligent and she deduces things and then acts on it. But Toreen goes out on a date with this woman. Her name is, I'm not going to pronounce this correctly, Aileen? Something like that. And they're by a waterfall, just enjoying this lakeside and this water. And then Teresa notices that a tree starts falling over and is going to crush them, and they can't hear it or her, crying out because of the waterfall. So she mind links with him and just, it's like, run. And so that perks him up. He was just like, what the fuck? And looks around, sees the tree, and then manages to dive out of the way and saves both of them. And so then it kind of becomes this thing where, she starts talking to him, and she's like, "Yeah, I can understand everything you say. I've been avoiding doing this because we're terrified that we know that the Kimari don't tend to suffer other intelligent creatures in their territory." And he's just like, "Okay, this is a big thing, but you don't really have to be worried about that. But I won't tell anybody because I can't let anything happen to you. We're bonded. I can't let anything bad happen to you," which is just, this super heartwarming kind of thing, which is sort of the base, it builds on this base of why this is such a feel good, warm kind of story, is that it's just like, despite all the Dragonette's instincts that, the world is a dangerous place, the story, like, the hand of the author is constantly just going like, nah, the Kimari are perfect. They would never do bad things. They're always going to be good in all of these situations, which I understand why that's part of the story, but it's just so weird that is set up, and yet all the Dragonettes, because of their instinct and stuff, do not trust them. It's just this weird sort of hand of the author versus, making this thing work to set the tone. And it's just kind of weird. I think it's very hard to believe in a society that has no crime and this, that, and the other thing. And it's just weird and it's kind of a hard pill to swallow. But it's done really well. You may or may not like it, but I think it still fits the story very, very well. So she starts talking to them, and then they become even better friends because now they can just talk to each other. And it becomes this weird thing where she has to pretend to still be, an animal when anybody else is around all the time. But they become this dynamic duo of hunting down these invasive species and killing them. And they eventually clear the city of all of these things and then get set up as, like a check cleaning crew for all incoming spaceships. Like, all ships that go to the planet have to go to his city so that he can inspect them to make sure that these creatures aren't there. That's like how important this job is, which I think says a lot about their society, that they're just like, yeah, it doesn't matter what the cost is. We would rather spend people's time and money diverting every ship to this one city to make sure that it is clean before the cargo gets off onto the planet, so that we don't have any infestations. That kind of says a lot about their society right there. And like it all culminates into them tracking down where this nest of these creatures are outside the city, and this big climactic, extermination event. And then ends the story with her realizing that, because she's already determined that despite the fact that many of the other Dragonettes have sort of, at least the ones who aren't traumatized by having lost their human family and stuff, have paired up and started having children, she was always kind of like, well, there's a lot more females than there are males, so it's fine if, I don't have a partner. I already have this life, and it's good. But then she finds out that there was somebody, a shy Dragonette, who had a crush on her, and so they go through this process of acclimating him to working with Taurine, and he become, as Taurine basically gets married to Aileen. Aileen kind of becomes this other dragonette's handler, so that all four of them live together, which is super cool. And it's just this amazing, interesting theme of them all talking to each other and just being like the ultimate edition of found family sort of stuff. And yeah, it's just such a great, wholesome story that, despite the fact that the wholesomeness is a little bit forced, it just feels good as a slice of life of what if human turned into dragon and was pet of aliens. How would that work? It's such a fantastic story. And I think it's because of the slice of life nature and that stuff is constantly happening. There's rarely like a day where nothing happens, and the story will skip over when stuff isn't happening and just immediately go to, because she was stuck there for like 2 months healing her wing, but it would just skip weeks at a time when it was just like, yeah, they're just doing their normal thing. And then when something different happens, that's when the story kicks in. And so it feels like stuff is always happening. There's always either character development happening or action happening, and it's like smoothed out so much that with other stories you could skip a page or two here and there and you'd probably be like, yeah, I didn't miss a whole lot. Whereas I don't ever that probably applies perfectly to this story because it's so smoothed out, but it always felt like I just needed more. Like, it's all, the whole story is just all these little crumbs. There's no like huge chunks that you're searching for. It's just like every story beat is something you want to consume. And so it's always just like, no, I just need more. It's like, okay, I've already done 4 chapters today, but I just need more. I know I need to go to bed right now or an hour ago, but I just need more, just like another couple chapters. And this book really gave me that sort of feel. Even other stories that I've highly enjoyed didn't give me that sort of feel as often as this book did, which I think says quite a lot about it. So, yeah, I've already started the second book, and I'll get a review out for that once I finish it. But I really hope there's going to be more in this series because, holy crap, as like a feel-good, relaxing, calming sort of read, it is just unmatched. I haven't found a lot of other things that are like that and still be interesting, but it just does it. And I really hope that more authors look into trying to do like fantasy sci-fi slice of life. Like, I look at it and I was thinking earlier, it's like, this is sort of like Babylon 5 or Deep Space Nine, where it's like, all the other similar things are action adventure stories, whereas these two shows were just like, no, these people just live here. They just live in this static place and things happen. So it's kind of like a slice of life story, and I think that's why those two shows stood out amongst, sci-fi stuff so well, is because they were kind of just slice of life stories about, well, what's going on and how do you make that interesting? And, when you have sci-fi and fantasy stuff, it's not all that hard to make slice of life interesting. So I really hope there's more in this vein because it is just so fantastic. I adore slice of life stories that are basically, what if these weird things all coming together, and how would that just work? How would it work? How would your typical person go about this? And you can just focus so much on characters that you don't need like huge action stories or deep plot to really force things forward. You can just focus on being character driven stories. Yeah, it's super great. Hope a lot more people read this and this sort of story goes on for a while and other people start making more of them. That is all for now. Have a great evening.